Hi, everyone. Hey, I'm sitting up on a rock. Up on a hill on the far side of Moncrief. And while I'm here, I could see my apartment complex just straight ahead of me. And like I noticed that when I was looking at my apartment complex and I was looking at where my apartment was, that I felt quite familiar with that place off in the distance, like I was even there still. And I could imagine my neighbors. But then on the other side of my apartment complex, where I don't go too often, I noticed that it just seemed like a building to me, not like any place I knew. In contrast to where I lived, that sparked a thought in my mind, and I remembered what Christ said in the Gospels. I believe in the Gospel of Matthew, where he said that where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. Where your treasures are, that's where your heart will be also. And I realized that and every one of you can also vouch that if say you're say all the way across on the other side of the world, and then you get a message saying that someone you love or someone you know is in trouble, then instantly all your attention gets focused on that person or that place where that situation is, where that evil is happening, and you can't get it off your mind because you're fixated on that issue and that's all you care about. And from that point onwards, you're not necessarily where you are physically, but you are where you are spiritually. And Paul also said in one of his epistles that we are seated with Christ in heavenly places, as if to say that even when we are down here on this turf, our spirits or our hearts are all the way up on high. And that idea of me being familiar with where I live and not associating with where I don't live, because like I said, the apartment complex is one, but on the part where I live at, in my mind it's like I'm still there because I'm so familiar with it. But the parts that I don't live or that I don't know, it's one complex, but it looks like a foreign land to me, like I have no clue what it even is. And that strange thought sparked a metaphysical thought in my mind, that what if what Christ said about where your treasures are, that's where your heart is also. That possibly and also the other scriptures that I shared just before about Paul saying that we are seated with Christ in heavenly places, that is it true that our hearts or our spirits, because in the Bible our hearts are synonymous with our spirits, but is it true that our hearts or our spirits have like a life diverse of what we really think that they have? because we're only familiar with like what we see around us, where we go, our plants, what we hear, like what we can feel. But is there like another higher dimension to life that we don't necessarily perceive, but that we experience on a spiritual level? Like say, scientists are always saying that our subconscious, it picks up things that we don't pick up with our consciousness, but it picks it up and it notes it, but then it brings it back to us in ways that we don't perceive. And so we live influenced by things that we're not even aware of. And we can even make decisions by things that have been programmed into us by others for us to do things that we ourselves don't necessarily want to do. And so yeah, that idea sparked that thought in my mind about, is it true that our hearts live, or our spirits live a life that we are not necessarily aware of? That without knowing, if there's trouble somewhere, like our hearts, not us, our hearts, like our spirit, is physically or spiritually there, observing and noting things that we don't necessarily know. And then there's this idea of like discernment. Like I remember this preacher, he once said that, I don't remember if he said he was shown or he learnt it, but he was saying that, that in a church, he was saying that people who have similar dimensions in ways can somehow pick themselves out to go and affront each other on whatever like their diverse issues are, that they will end up bonding together and funding each other and living as their ways go. But they can't necessarily know all these things just so, but somehow they pick up who's akin to them, and then they group, and then they do whatever their common sense are. So like that teaching, and many of you probably perceive that teaching as well, like we somehow always find ourselves. But that teaching implies that there's like a spiritual dimension of knowing and perceiving with us all, that we flow in, like I was saying about the subconscious, that we don't necessarily perceive. So that's there. So could it be that our spirits, our hearts, outside of our knowledge, are doing things or experiencing things or going places that we are completely unaware of, but we think that we're living our 3-dimensional and 4-dimensional time, 4-dimensional lives, doing what we do, going where we go, and interacting and living our lives as we live, without necessarily knowing that there are spiritual dimensions on us that we don't necessarily even perceive. Like like there's this American prophet, Thomas Decker. He's actually a Jewish man, actually also, and he was teaching about how when he was doing his ministry, when he was preaching, that witches will come in and will try and release like evil spirits on him, and how he will speak, once he spoke the word like, "Satan, you're bound," and then there was a witch in his service whom the moment he said that, felt like chains wrapped all around him. I believe that our hearts, our spirits, even despite our physical, our 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional life and knowledge, can do things that we are not even aware of. Per se, that when you think evil thoughts or even good thoughts, it can release like spiritual, like evil forces at someone, or good forces at another. And like people like who always talk about energy, they're always saying like, and you all would know, like many of you have this gift. They're always saying that they can feel like the energy or the vibes coming from people who are evil per se, and the good energy coming from people who are right. But our hearts, our spirits may be living a life completely diverse of our understanding, of our knowledge of what our lives are. And I'll put in this point also. Have you noticed what the word heart actually sounds like? Heart. Break it down. He art. He is. He is somewhere else. Like what Christ said, that wherever our treasures are, there our hearts would be also. So wherever our treasures are, there our hearts would be also. And the word that he's saying will be also broken down. Let me spell it H-E-A-R-T. Break it down. He, then A-R-T. He art. What does that sound like? He is. So it's implying that our hearts have the capacity to be where we physically are not. And in the Bible, there's mention of the prophet Elisha when the king of Syria was planning his attacks on Israel, and he was making his plans here and then in verse, they were always getting thwarted. And then he got concerned. It's like, why is it that every time I plan to do something, somehow it gets rotted, and it fails, and nothing comes of it? And then one of his servants told him, the prophet Elisha from Dothan, he listens to all your counsel with his heart, and then tells the king of Israel to go and spoil your plans. And in the Bible, when the king of Syria learned about this, he went to try and capture Elisha and bring him to his city to kill him. But when he sent his army to go and get him, then Elisha prayed for God to blind the eyes of the whole army, and God blinded their eyes. And then them not being able to see, he went and led them all the way back to I believe Samaria, and they were fed and sent off. So his plans came of naught. But Elisha was able to, with his heart, go into the king's chamber and hear all that he was saying and planning to do to ruin it for the nation of Israel. So yeah, the idea that I brought up may seem very strange, may seem too out of place, and I add to like heart, he art, or you can even make it hair art if you want to, but it can change locale. And it says wherever your treasure is, that's where it will be also. So imagine that in marriages and relationships, people share their hearts. The woman's heart in the man, the man's heart in the woman. And that may be why God says they become one flesh, because they share like one spiritual bond. They are connected to each other heart-wise. That may be why that families or husbands and wives feel that they're family and connect and live together, because their hearts bond become one, which I believe is why in Genesis it says that the twain will leave mother and father and be joined together and become one flesh. They don't physically become one flesh. They are still two people, but because their hearts join, then because one heart is in another and the other heart is in the other, through the heart they become one, so their bodies are seen as one body. I believe that's why husbands and wives, when they are married, or even people who are fornicating, when they get too close, they feel like as if like they're family or like they're one person. I believe that's why. But the idea of a heart being able to divest itself of where the physical man or woman is and go where their intentions are, or possibly where it's even ever thought of, is a very spiritual thought. And it seems very strange, like too supernatural, too out of hand. But I believe there's plausibility to it. I believe there's truth to it, that our hearts or our spirits are more supernatural than we give it, or we give them credit to be. You can think about that. You can tell me what you think if you will. But that's what I wanted to say. I pray it will be a blessing to you. I pray it may be an eye-opening. But we can go back and forth on this one if anyone wants to like debate or anything like that. Anyway, yeah, God bless you all. Bye.